Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mike Talk, and I am your host, Mike the Realtor. You know, I always like to start off my podcast with like a little story. And for me, growing up, I really didn't know much about politics. I mean, growing up, we had a president by the name of Ronald Reagan, who I knew was an actor, and I was like, oh, that means I could be a president. But we didn't know much about politics. We were on the north side of Chicago, and it was a little rougher back then when we were kids. And I think for us was just getting to school and passing your classes so we can go off to college and do better things. And so over the course of the years, I reconnect with an old friend by the name of Edwin Reyes. By the way, he is our guest today. I'll go straight into it. He is a politician from Chicago, but born and raised on the north side of Chicago as well, has an extensive career with the military, with the state police. I mean, he has a great resume as well. And you know me, I'm all about the stories of the people. And I had to share Eddie's story with you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce to you my good friend, Edwin Reyes. Good morning, Eddie. How you doing?
Good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't want to do like this formal introduction, like what you used to be titled in the political world and what you're doing today. And we're going to cover all that, Eddie. But I think, you know me, I'm all about friendships. I'm all about relationships. And I like to introduce people by their name because that's who you are to me. You're my friend. You're Edwin Reyes, and I've known you for so long. And thanks for being on the show. But I want to know, and we want to know, where were you? We know you were a Cook County commissioner. I would say about what, 5-6 years ago, something like that.
Just over 7 years ago now.
Just over 7 years, and something occurred, and now you're rerunning again. So tell us about all of this, because in the political world, a lot of us may be in Chicago. It's like we know that this is big political machine, but we don't know the ins and outs. And so, what happened? What got you into politics? What pulled you out? And why are you coming back?
That's a good question. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and get the message out to the voters who care about their community, who care about good government, who care about integrity. So when I got back from the Air Force in '86, my parents had retired and moved to Puerto Rico. So I had to find a place to live. And my older brother was still single at the time. He said, yeah, come live with me. And so that was in the Albany Park neighborhood, Montrose and Spalding area. So I was in my 20s and happened to take care of his property, cut the grass, do some, light maintenance, shovel the snow in the winter. And especially in the winter, sometimes when I would come home, there was no parking. And I got together with some of my neighbors and started talking to them. And most of them were seniors at the time. And for some reason, seniors, they didn't like using their garages. So they would park in the front. And of course, some of them had physical disabilities. So they had the physical handicap signs. So they would park, but not all of them did. And what we noticed was that there was about 5, 6, 7 abandoned cars on the block that were abandoned. And back then in the 80s, the city didn't have private tow companies as they do now. So getting a car towed from your block meant that, this was pre-internet, pre-311. So you physically had to talk to your precinct captain if there was one, or actually go to your alderman's office. And me and a few neighbors got together, went to the alderman's office on ward night. Back then, it was Alderman Joe Kotler's. His office was on Pulaski, just south of Addison. And we spoke to him and we told him, hey, there's 5, 6, I don't know, but quite a few abandoned cars on our block. We're having difficulties finding parking. So just for some odd reason, I became the spokesperson of that group. And he called me a few days later and offered me a job. and I was finishing undergrad, and that was my first exposure to Chicago style politics. Because a couple of weeks after that, I showed up. He tossed me the keys to his car, and he said, "See that black four-door Caprice Classic? Pull it in front. I'll be right there." So I
Sort
ended
of
up,
like a Chicago Bronx tale story per se, right?
yeah, I ended up driving him for a few months, on a daily basis, and seeing the inside of Chicago politics. That was the beginning of car cell phones. So he had it mounted on his car with the cord. And, I, of course, would hear his conversations and started getting the inner workings of Chicago style politics.
Now, this all seemed normal for you, right?
I didn't know, I didn't have nothing to compare it to because I, like you, don't come from a political family. We weren't involved in politics. My dad was a laborer, a Korean War veteran, which I'm very proud of. And he's going to be 97 in a couple of weeks and still has all his faculties. So,
Wow. Yes. Yes. Happy birthday to Poppy for sure.
yeah. So, he was not hard work and in doing the right thing and going to church on Sundays. And that was the extent. He didn't get involved with Chicago politics. So worked there for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years. And then I was fortunate enough to get hired by the state police in 1989.
So you get onto the state police, you work as a state trooper. Now, I will confess to you on my show that I did throw your name out there a couple times on the highway, when and it did help. It did help. So thank you for that. I don't think you knew. I think a lot of us threw your name out there many times.
I plead the fifth on that one.
Now, were you still dangling in politics while you were a state trooper?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt, the urge to serve in that capacity and supported what I like to call good government, non-machine candidates and elected officials, such as former city clerk and former state senator Miguel Del Valle, who I think is the epitome of integrity and good government. He was always fighting the machine and was never part of it. And then his successor, Willie Delgado, Senator Willie Delgado, supported him. My first actual foray into city politics and actually being involved in a campaign was in the early 80s or late 80s, I think it was. Yeah, with Alderman Ray Figueroa. And he was an anti-machine. He went on to be a judge and has retired since. So that was my first Chicago-style politics on actually getting involved at the precinct level, door knocking level. And he won that race.
You know what trips me out a little bit is you mentioned these names of men with integrity, and you rarely hear their names on the news. We hear the opposite common.
Exactly.
Right. And that's sometimes, as a voter, I want to know who is for the people. I get it. I get it. But who is for the people? Who is for us? Especially nowadays, we see the news, we see all the stuff that's going on in the political world. And it's like, for us, who do we trust? Right. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because you can help, us and our audience kind of figure out what policies that we believe more in that will drive us to vote for a person that's for the government. But tell me a little bit of that as you now move forward, right? You're a state trooper, you're dangling into politics. Now you're into campaigns. You're starting to see this. What makes you say, I'm going to run for Cook County Commissioner?
Well, it wasn't a decision I made. I was selected to replace the former Cook County Commissioner who had stepped down to become the alderman in his area. So there was a vacancy. And when there's a vacancy and there's less than 2 years on the term, there is no election because of the cost involved in holding an election. So the local committeemen of that district, in this case, the 8th district, select the replacement. And I had the majority support from then the local committeemen, who most of them are not there anymore. They've gone on and retired.
Interesting.
And so I got appointed in 2009 of September 1st. The elections were March of 2010. So I had about, a 2-month uh, introduction into Chicago politics, and then really had to start campaigning.
Well, that's a speed course. That's a speed course.
Yeah, it was a crash course, and then had to start campaigning and collecting signatures right away. And then the election was in the fall, unlike now, which due to the COVID pandemic and the delay in the census count, the election was pushed back 3.5 months
Hmm.
to June 28th. So instead of gathering signatures in the fall, we were gathering signatures up until March on the 6th and submitted for to get on the ballot on the 7th. So that was that, and then I was with, when you get invited to the dance, you have to dance with the person that took you there. So that was a hard lesson to learn, and then I soon realized that being part of the incumbency or the machine
Hmm.
politics, they want to
Hmm.
control you, they want to tell you how to vote, who
That's
to hire,
interesting.
who to support and who not support. And so once I realized that my integrity was going to be questioned, I separated
Mm.
myself and then, campaigned on my own for my reelection in 2014 and made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of rookie mistakes, and thought that the voters would be able to clearly see the difference between me and my opponent. Didn't lose by much, but made a few critical mistakes during the campaign that you put those together, and a margin of 3 to 5% can cost you an election. So ended up losing in 2014.
Now, do you think that those few votes that you didn't get actually lost you the election? Do you not think that you were just against the machine that was unbeatable?
Yeah, it's a combination of all those things, and it it was the only one that I had on my side was State Senator Miguel
Mhm.
Del Valle, and at that time, State Senator now Circuit Court Clerk Iris Martinez, but everybody else was against me.
So you lose the election in 14, right? Something crazy happens. Chicago politics. What else is new, right? That's still lingering till this day today. Tell me a little bit about what happens. You lose your election and then boom.
So my former sponsor, which I knew sooner or later was going to get in trouble with the federal government, and since has been indicted and convicted. And there's a word in Chicago that is used a lot. It's nepotism. When you are the elected official, you feel that the seat belongs to you or your family, and you put in your son or
Hmm.
daughter. We've seen it, of course, throughout the history of
Wow.
Chicago politics. And in this case, the incumbent who beat me in 14 is the seat holder who I'm running against now. Uh,
So
the dad has since gotten convicted and is waiting for sentencing.
so the dad is sitting in jail. The son has your former seat. All this time, you're looking at 8 years. Am I right?
It'll be 8 years in December. Yeah.
So he's had this seat 8 years,
Mhm.
knowing that the feds have been on his dad. Come on. The feds are not that dumb that they're going to say, okay, well, the son has nothing to do with it. I mean, he was appointed, right? Now,
No, he beat me. I was appointed in 09 and won in 10 and lost in 14.
right, you were appointed in 09. He beat you, right, by a few votes, which we probably feel like those votes really didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you step out 8 years later. It's almost 8 years later. You're coming back, Eddie. And I've spoken to you. I've spoken to quite a few people that say, Eddie's jumping back in and stoked. People are stoked. Why are you trying to get the seat back? Besides, the Chicago politics or whatnot, but for Eddie, for Mr. Eddie Reyes, why do you feel the need that you need to come back and do this?
Oh, it's going back to my passion for service. I served about 11 years in the U.S. Air Force active duty Guard and Reserve. I served
Thank
24
you.
years as a state trooper. I feel I have about 10 years left of service in me. And it's not so much me, it's to prove to the people that you don't have to put up with corrupt politicians, with machine politics, that there's enough support for someone like me that's an independent Democrat that is not beholden to the machine or to the Democratic Party, who will not be bought, and I won't sell my soul or my integrity or my character to win this race
Mm.
or to stay in the race. And that was the case in 14. I drew the line in the sand with my former sponsor and said, "Hey, you cross this line again, it's over, and we're done. I'm on my own." And the mistakes I made, they were enough to get my opponent, who's the incumbent now, over the top. But I feel I won't make those mistakes now. I'm older, I'm wiser. I have a good, strong team of political folks that are volunteers. I'm not paying anybody as of this date to be involved in the campaign. And so we've been out there since November 1st. And I've been going to events, talking to folks, talking to seniors. And really, my opponent is nowhere to be found because of what's happened to his dad.
So the opponent, do you think is, I don't want to say expecting to lose, because like you said, we haven't seen him. I mean, we haven't even heard of him. And so do you think he's just kind of sitting back in the cut and trying to figure out what he's going to do, or you think he's going to run?
I really couldn't tell you. I don't think he's running. I don't think he's running expecting to lose.
Now, what's his name? Who's your opponent's name? Who holds the seat now?
The incumbent is Louis Arroyo Jr., and we have another candidate, Rory McHale, who has submitted petitions as well. And so now it's a 3-person race. I'm anticipating today we're going to have 2 more candidates, but we'll see.
Interesting. How many candidates is normally like the standard, or what is the limit of candidates for a Cook County Commissioner?
No, there is no limit.
There is no limit. Interesting.
This is a democracy. Anybody who gathers at least 346 valid signatures. And look, this is America. It's the greatest country in the world. It's a democracy, and everybody has a right.
That's right.
To run for office.
That's right. That's right. And so, when is the election?
June 28th.
June 28th.
Yep. And then there's early voting. I think it's about 14 or 15 days before that date. I think it shuts down 2 days before the 28th. And so people have every opportunity to early vote. You don't need a reason to early vote if you are going to be out of town or you're going to be physically unable to go to the polls. You can request an absentee ballot, and it'll be mailed to you. You fill it out, and you put it back in the mail, or you take it to one of the Board of Election sites downtown. And so you can early vote at 50 locations throughout the city. Any of them you are eligible to vote. You don't have to vote in your ward or district or precinct. You can vote at any of the 50 early voting sites.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you win? Like the first thing that's been on your mind, your heart, you're like, this is the first thing I'm going to tear up. Is there something that's there that you're like, I got to change this in my district?
Well, from your lips to God's ears, God willing, I will be victorious, and this will be a victory for the hardworking voters of the 8th District who deserve to be represented fairly, without any taint, without any corruption, and that are proactive in reaching out and listening to the voters and hearing what their concerns are. And obviously right now, I'm campaigning on 3 principles and 3 points, because as you know, Mike, the majority of politicians are going to make all kinds of promises during the campaign. As we see with this mayor, she has not come through on the majority of the things she said she was, because they're going to tell you what you want to hear during the campaign. And I never was like that. And I'm not going to change to win an election. Number one issue that is affecting voters of the 8th District and throughout the city is crime. And we've had an array and an abundance of elected officials that are treating the victims like the criminals and the criminals like the victims. And sooner or later, the rubber meets the road, and we have to stand up to career criminals. Now,
you're starting to see that shift now, even in Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, from defund the police to now, we never said that. And it's like,
There's nothing more that a good police officer hates is a bad police officer.
mm,
And sure, there has been documented cases, the ones that get the publicity and the ones that don't, throughout this country, of bad policing.
yeah,
And I will tell you that it all starts with the leadership of that town, city, or state, and how that person is trained in the police academy. And so if you are lowering the standards and holding people's hands to pass whatever phase of the academy,
mm,
that sends them a signal that, you know what, this is no big deal.
yeah,
Then when they get on the street, their integrity is questioned, and they're bought
mm,
and sold because they think that they can get away with it. And so
interesting.
what we have to do is we have to make the training and the standards, we have to raise them to a level where you get the best of the best and you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel and letting people become police officers. Number one, at an early age, I think 21 is too early to become a police officer, and have some kind of work or education under your belt. And so it proves to society that you are a responsible person of integrity and that you will fulfill the duties fairly
Mm.
and equitably throughout your duty as a police officer.
How old do you think a cadet going into the police academy should be?
At least 25.
Okay, I was thinking 24. Okay, yeah, 25 is a good. I mean, I think that's yeah, 21. I mean, I've met some young 22, 23-year-old police officers that were, man, some of them even out of the military as well, very young, and they go straight into the academy. So you would push for changing in the, would it be obviously the Chicago Police Department, you would change or you would push to change some of the requirements then, right? You think it's important?
Well, just to be clear, as a Cook County Commissioner, you have no oversight over anything that happens in the city of Chicago. So that would be the alderman's role and responsibility.
Mm,
However, I will say that, if you serve 4 years and you're honorably discharged, right? Because a lot
mm,
of young men and women go into the military right after high school at 18 and come out after one tour, 22, 23. I think there should be an exception because that person has proved that they
mhm.
can be part of a team, part of
Makes
a
sense.
bigger
Yeah,
body other than themselves. And they've established 3 or 4 years or maybe more of work history and been a responsible person. I think that person should be eligible.
yeah, and that's a whole larger scale too, right? That's military, especially they come out of military police. You can
Yeah.
pretty much be a cakewalk going into CPD, right?
Yeah, and so the other, that point is, as I support good law enforcement, and we have to be clear about that. And just like in every profession, you have terrible lawyers, terrible doctors,
Yeah,
terrible educators. The list goes on
yeah,
and on. And so to throw
yeah,
the majority of hardworking women and men in this country because of their profession, and it's a honorable and noble profession. And let's not kid ourselves. No society can exist without the women and men of law enforcement. That's absolutely impossible. I mean, look at the crime rate now. What's happening throughout this country? Women and policemen are being disparaged. They're being spit at. They're being attacked. They're being killed just sitting in their vehicles. And that
yeah,
has to come to a
yeah,
stop. We have to
yeah,
abide by the rule of law and
yeah,
respect men and women. Their fathers, their mothers, their sons and
yeah,
daughters, brothers and sisters, just like everybody
yeah.
else. And
I
and,
get it.
and
Yeah, for sure.
acknowledge there's some bad ones out there. We have to get rid of the
Yeah,
bad ones to save
yeah,
the profession and bring it back to the honorable and noble respect that
yeah,
it deserves. And so
yeah.
my second point is at Cook County, we have to have some strong ethics ordinance that the commissioners, the 17 commissioners, would have to abide by. Right now, the ethics laws are lax at every level of government in this state, at the county, at the city. You can be a convicted felon and still run for Cook County Commissioner. I think that's wrong. I think
Wow.
you've blown your
What?
opportunity. So
Wow.
I want
Interesting.
to introduce ethics reform ordinance that would have some teeth and have some consequences if a
Mm,
commissioner were to violate those ethics
interesting.
rules. Mhm.
So those are very important. I mean, I didn't even know that, a convicted felon can be Cook County commissioner. I know that there's reform, and I know that, people come out changed and whatnot. I'm not against that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, but for certain things, yeah, there's just, I mean, this is same thing. You can't just go walk in and buy a gun if you're a convicted felon, right? I mean, I can, and
And you can't be a teacher, you can't be a
yeah,
police officer, you can't be several other professions that require a
true.
licensing. So,
Yeah.
but it's unusual and it's interesting to me as the policymakers and the lawmakers, that rule doesn't apply to them.
I mean, I'm sure this goes deeper and deeper, Eddie. And man, I would love to chop that up and get to know more and more about that. But that's the past. I mean, Chicago politics. I think a lot of us still hang on to that, and it scares us and whatnot. And I think that there are great citizens that say we just want change. We want someone who's going to represent the voice of the people. And so, I wanted to get you on the show, Eddie, and give yourself and the opportunity to have the audience say, look, that this is what he's about. He's about some reform and whatnot, and he's a man of integrity. And like I said, when I start this podcast, I want to tell people's stories, and I want to share those stories. And it's something that for me, it's going to help all of us just be a little bit more informed. Now, let me ask you, as we bring this plane to a landing, if someone wants to get into politics, a young man coming out of high school, do they got to go to college? Do they just jump back?
Absolutely not. Nope.
Tell me a bit. If I'm 21 years old, I'm kind of Ubering because these young guys are Ubering and stuff, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do, and then politics may be calling them. What can they do? What advice do you give a young man or woman?
Well, do your research. Find a candidate that you believe in what they stand for and what their agenda is, and introduce yourself. Set up a meeting,
Oh,
introduce yourself, and tell them you want to
interesting.
volunteer, and probably be a registered voter. Because
Yeah.
that's your voice, and then get involved. And if that's something you're pursuing at a college level, at a junior college or a university, get involved in the political science club and volunteer and then apply for an internship
That's
if
awesome.
that's your
Okay.
passion. And you'll be pleasantly surprised because there's good women and men that are involved in politics. However, like you said, it seems that the ones that
Yeah.
lack judgment
Yeah.
and lack integrity and are part of the machine because they are
Mhm.
beholden to
Yeah.
somebody who put them
And,
in
and
that spot. So, I like to say, if you become a doctor, you become a lawyer, nobody gives you that education. You have to earn it yourself, and you have to pass
yeah.
the bar exam, and you have to pass the medical exam
Yeah.
to get that license. And, that's true in law enforcement too. You go through academy, and as we know in the military, the Marines are the toughest because the boot
Sheesh.
camp is the toughest. And so, the women and men that finish the Marine Academy and the Air Force Academy and the Navy Academy and the Army Academy, they take pride in what they've accomplished. And so, you know, uh, easy come, easy go. But if it's a hard row to hoe, then you take pride in that, and the results will show, and people will recognize that. And for me, it's always been about service. It's always been about helping the community and proving to the naysayers that a person like me who runs independently can be successful and can have a group of women and men on his team that are people of integrity and high moral character, and we can win.
If anyone wants to help you out, if anyone wants to go door knocking with you, if we're talking to that young man or woman right now that's in their car driving to work and saying, "Man, I want to get into politics. I want to help Eddie. I believe in what he's doing." How can they find you? How can they help you? Because the election is right around the corner.
Absolutely. They can go to my website, electedwinreyes.com, and send me a message there. Or they could visit us at the campaign office at 4321 West Armitage. 4321.
You have a Facebook page too?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Edwin Reyes 4188 or edwinreyes.com on Instagram and Facebook.
There it is, guys. You heard it from the man himself, Eddie Reyes. Contact him if you want to get in, if you want to help hands-on. He needs your help. Get out there, reach out to him. Trust me, he's a good guy. I've known him my whole life practically. And so, yeah, you know me, I'm all about people's stories and sharing them. And like I said, this show's about real life, real talk with Mike the Realtor. This is what I love to do. And these are the people that I love. And I want to be able to share their stories and then help you guys at the same time, because there's people out there that want to jump into politics. I mean, you could be 40 years old and get in, right, Eddie?
Absolutely. There's no age cutoff. And there's pretty much, if you have a passion for serving, this is a great career.
It's what I like to call this internal compulsion, right? That you just have. It's a desire that's burning in you to whatever it is you want to do. And sometimes it's serving the community, it's serving people, whether it's through politics or through real estate, right? So, all right, guys, you heard it. Get out there, talk to your neighbors, talk to Eddie. Eddie, again, I don't want to keep you. I know you got to get out there on the street and hustle. And thank you so much for being on our show today. Thank you for just giving us an insight of what politics used to be like and what it could be like today, and what you're doing in the future, and how you're going to help the voice of the people. Good luck with everything. I'm definitely praying for you, Eddie. Thank you so much for your time. Let's give it up to Eddie, man. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and Eddie Reyes. Until next time, remember, subscribe to my YouTube channel as Mike the Realtor, where you're going to have all my video podcasts on there titled Mike Talk, where it's real life, real talk with Mike the Realtor. All right, guys, until next time, so long, everybody. Thanks, Eddie. Peace out.
Thank you, Mike. Have a good one.